You're listening to In the Chair, a podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and around the world. Find out more at masonicpodcast.com. But first, welcome your host, Robert Bone.
Well then, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Hope you've had a great 2015 and Happy New Year for 2016. And I am Robert Bone and I'm the host of In the Chair. And this is a podcast for Freemasons in England, the UK and all around the world. And of course, anyone who's interested in Freemasonry. And I hope you're having a great day whenever and wherever you're listening to this. And as I said, this is actually coming out on the 31st of December 2015. So it's the last day of 2015. I wasn't going to do a podcast between Christmas and New Year, but I've been looking back over 2015, looking at what I've achieved, and then looking forward to 2016 and looking at whereabouts I want to go with the podcast. And I thought, I know I've already got some interviews and bits lined up for 2016. Was going to have a bit of a break. I thought I'd pop on just to do a quick podcast today, just as a little bit of a recap on things. And it sounds odd, but also maybe to ask a few favours of you, if that would be okay. So, well, let's get on with things. So, we're on to episode 20, and the podcast actually launched right at the end of August. It was the August bank holiday weekend. We come out with a double header, and that was first of all the introduction, and actually what's been so far the most popular episode, which was episode 2, an interview with Martin Fawkes from Lewis Masonic. And I think we really kicked things off and then went on the next week. Episode 3 come out, and that was Rick Smith about learning Masonic ritual. If you're a new listener or you listen to those podcasts, you can find out more about those by going on to masonicpodcast.com and then / and then typing in the number of the show. So, for example, Rick Smith's one was number 3. So you go masonicpodcast.com / 3. I'll also point out as well, if you liked any of those and you want to share them with people, on the website I've added some share buttons, so you can easily share them to people via social media or email. The reason I mention that is, of course, say for example the Rick Smith one about learning Masonic ritual. If you know someone in your lodge who is having to learn and could help, and you think actually that they'd benefit from hearing some of those tips and tricks and techniques to learning ritual, what you do is you go onto masonicpodcast.com / 3. What comes up on the left hand side, these little buttons then slide over. It should come up automatically, and if you want to share it to them via email, you'd click the email button, and then they'll be emailed a link, and then they can listen to the podcast through that website. Or of course then they know how they can click the links to follow through onto iTunes or Stitcher and listen, if they've got their preferred format. Those buttons also have Twitter, so you could tweet them or put it onto your Twitter account. Or if you're a member of a lodge Facebook group or in your province or something, again, that would be great if you can help share that by clicking those little links. And I'm pointing that out because that only went on just before Christmas. And at the moment, the podcast is mainly getting shared to people via social media. I'm going onto Twitter, people are retweeting it. And anyone who likes a post or retweets a post and mentions it or contacts me, I genuinely do appreciate every one of those. But of course, that's just doing it via sort of Twitter. And what I found over the last few episodes is that although we're still getting new listeners to the show, the number of new listeners, the number of new subscribers does seem to have been sort of tailing off over recently. And I think what's happened is, of course, there might be somewhere between 150 to 200,000 members just in the UK and England alone. And of course, we're not just limiting this to the UK, it's all around the world. I've actually got a really good show coming up, another international show coming up for the next episode that should be coming up for. But the thing is, there's all these people out there, but they don't know about it. And some of them, yes, are on Twitter, but they maybe don't follow other Twitter accounts that they might sort of say, well, actually, they want to keep their work Twitter accounts and their Masonic Twitter accounts or their social Twitter accounts separate, so they don't follow Masonic tweets, and therefore they don't know about the show. So if you can help forward things, and to make it easier, I've actually done some flyers. Well, actually, there's two sorts. You can find one which is a JPEG version, which is perfect for emailing or for embedding on websites or anything like that, or tweeting about. And you can find that by going to masonicpodcast.com/flyer. That's FLYER. And it comes up with a JPEG image. You just need to right click there and save it onto your hard drive. Then you can attach it onto emails and forward it onto people in your lodge, something like that, or other people you know who might be interested, or put it onto your lodge website so then people can find out about it. That's the JPEG version. There's also another version which is a very similar address to find it, and that's flyers, masonicpodcast.com/flyers. Now that's flyer with an S, that's plural. That will now open a PDF version, but the PDF version has 4 on there. What you need to do is hit the print button, it will print it out, and then you cut it into 4, cut it into quarters. You now have 4 flyers that you can hand out to people. I've done that in a way so that uses a bit less ink if you print it out as well. So if you've got a printer, I don't want you to be using up your ink. But what I'd really appreciate if you could, when you're before your next lodge meeting, go on to that, masonicpodcast.com/flyers, or go on to all the links are of course on masonicpodcast.com/20, the show notes page. So those links, go onto there, print that out, maybe print that out 3 times. You'll now have just used up 3 bits of paper with some scissors, chop each of those into the 4 bits. You now have 12 flyers. When you go to your lodge meeting, you don't have to give a flyer to everyone, but maybe the people that would be interested in following the show, on listening to the podcast and those interviews. So that's going to be people like the deacons, that's going to be like the Master Masons, and even any new initiates or people that you might be interviewing to join the lodge, or friends of yours that might be considering joining and want to find out more. This isn't just for Masons, this show. So give some of those out. And the reason I say that is word of mouth is fantastic, but the problem is word of mouth at a lodge meeting doesn't always mean that by the time people get home that evening, go to work the next day, by the weekend, they're thinking, was there a podcast? Can't remember what it was called. A bit of paper, it's only going to be small. They can stick that in their pocket when they get home. They can go onto their iPad, their iPhone, onto their computer, do the relevant searching, find it, hit the subscribe button, hit the download button, and tap into the resource that I'm trying to create here. So if you could do that, that would be very much greatly appreciated. And the reason I'm doing this is because, yes, it did launch successfully, and I'm really proud of what I've achieved. But with all those Freemasons in England, in the UK and around the world, and the resource that I've got, I just sort of think there should be more people to find out about this. And I do think what it is there's a certain batch of Freemasons who are on Twitter, who are of course forwarding it, and I do get loads of retweets. But in the end, not everyone is on Twitter, or they are, but they're not linking it to their work accounts. And that's the thing, is they don't know about these things. If they don't look, then they're not going to know it's there. And that's the problem. People need to be told about it and then given a resource that they can go away and take away. So that's why I'm trying to add these share buttons and give ways to help the word of mouth go along. So if you can get involved in that, that would be very much greatly appreciated. I do this independently. I have no financial backing from anyone. I'm doing this all out of my own pocket, and it's not cheap. I've had to buy equipment. There's hosting on it, not just on the website, but also on the whereabouts the podcast itself gets hosted. I've got to pay for that. I mean, if anyone did want to help sponsor the show, that genuinely would be very much appreciated. But it's not just the financial burden. It also takes a lot of time. You might hear a podcast that maybe lasts 45 minutes, but to make that 45 minutes, there's a few hours work that goes into it. I've got to arrange interviews, I've got to chase people up, we've got to arrange the times and then do the interview, then I've got to record it and I've got to edit it down, make it, upload it, and then I've got to be typing up show notes, putting it on the website. There's all those other bits and pieces that go into it. It does take time for me to do, and it's one of the things where if it's not growing, if I can't really broaden the audience for it, it does start getting to the stage where I'm going to be thinking, well, I'm just going out promoting it to the same people each time who are already listeners, and that's why I really need to sort of grow it. So if you do appreciate this resource, then genuinely please do help. I mean, another way you can do it is, and I know I mentioned this a few times, go onto iTunes. iTunes only really shows things, it doesn't count downloads. It's just the conduit for downloading. But what it does look at is ratings and reviews. So if you enjoy the show, go onto iTunes, leave a rating, leave a review. It not only is a bit of an ego boost for me, I admit, when some of them and some of the comments I get, it really does feel good. That's what drives me to do it and to keep doing it. If it's getting more comments like that, but it also, iTunes look at that, and then that's going to show it higher in search rankings. So maybe people that don't know it exists, when they're looking for a Masonic podcast, it's then going to show higher. Of course, it shows quite well now for In the Chair, but of course, if you type in Masonic podcast, that's the sort of thing people are going to be looking at. We need to get it up there. So, that's going to be really, the 2016. And if you have any ideas, again, I can only do this from, off my own back. And that's the problem sometimes, is when I'm emailing people, they don't know who I am, what I am, they just hit the delete button. That means that, of course, some of the interviews, I have to be with people that I already know, people in my province, purely because I already have a relationship with them. They don't mind, oh yeah, Rob, give us a call, get on Skype, we'll record an interview for this thing that you're doing. They don't even know some of them don't even know what this thing is. So, of course, this is being done independently, but I do have a few people from Berkshire Province on here, and Berkshire actually are really great. They now let me, when I put a podcast out, it goes onto the website with links so that people can listen to it, and that's great. But I'm not getting any support from the United Grand Lodge of England. Now, I'm not having a go at them. I think what it is people will tweet the Grand Lodge of England. I get things where I'm retweeted in there and people talk about it, but not once has the United Grand Lodge of England mentioned about the podcast in any of their tweets. They've never retweeted any of mine. They've never helped promote the show or even mention the show. They've never basically acknowledged that it exists, which is really odd, because I'm doing for free for them what they're spending a lot of money trying to do, which is get Freemasonry promoted out there and a resource to younger people. So it's a little bit odd, and what I put that down to is the people that obviously run the Twitter accounts aren't the people that are also in charge of the looking forward marketing plan for Freemasonry in the UK. So they're just sort of it's cross purposes. And that's why I need people to be out letting people know about this, so then it can get to those people at the top who at the moment, there's obviously those gatekeepers in the way who just go, oh, it's not to do with me, hit the delete button, no point mentioning it. And, really need the support to get this out there to the much wider audience. And it's crazy because, it's in a way, the Grand Lodge of Bulgaria, crazily enough, actually sort of promotes me more than the actual Lodge of England, which I'm a member of, which is a little bit crazy. Now, I'm not saying that to try and have a go. I know that there are people, obviously, senior people who obviously do listen to the podcast. What would be great is, I'm not trying to have a pop at any of you, don't get me wrong in that. What I mean is that if you can help sort of spread the word out there, because of course I've set something up off my own back, which I think is a great resource for them to be able to use and to provide some guests for the interviews, which I think would be absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure as you as listeners would really appreciate. On that front, if you have ideas for listeners, also get in contact with me. Let me know if you can sort of try to introduce. That would be fantastic. And some of the interviews that I've actually had have come about through that, when listeners have actually contacted me and said this person would be a great. I'd love to, love to listen to them. They'd be a great fit for the show, and they got me in contact. And yes, it's been bang on, and that those are people that I wouldn't have either thought about or been able to connect with. Some of them ones have actually just been people that are listeners on the show, and have contacted me and said, I'd like to come on, and I think, it would be useful. And I thought, yeah, great, perfect. So if you know someone or would like to come on yourself, please let me know. We have a whole variety of people. I mean, subjects that we've covered. Of course, we had Nigel Harris-Cooksley, who come on twice actually to talk about websites, and then general social media, and he'll be coming on hopefully again to really talk about drilling down social media. Those have been very popular. Of course, Martin Fulks from Lewis Masonic. That's episode number 2. As I said, that's so far actually the most popular episode, closely followed by Rick Smith. About learning the Masonic ritual. What else we covered? Scottish Freemasonry, Freemasonry in Scotland. That was very, very popular. Many thanks, Barry. And I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, that I might have a trip up to Scotland to actually visit a Scottish lodge. If it's Barry's lodge, then that will be fantastic. And I might be going with Mark and James, who were actually interviewed on number 10. And they that was actually just the two young Masons. That again has been a massively popular episode. Both deacons in their lodge. One's the junior, one's the senior deacon, and I got them on just to talk about Freemasonry from a younger person's perspective. There was no agenda. They haven't written books or anything, and people really appreciated just talking about, among Masons, talking about the energy and the enthusiasm for Freemasonry they had. Talking of younger people, we had Philip, who was talking about the university scheme and talking about it from inside, because he actually come into Freemasonry from the university scheme, and actually later in, I was going to say last year now, by the time you're listening to this probably, but in 2015 he actually became the master of Greyfriars Lodge, and it was great to talk to him about his journey through Freemasonry and being part of the university scheme. Ladies Freemasonry, that was an interesting one, and I know people were definitely very interested in that, so many thanks to Helen who come on to talk about that one. And of course we covered charity. We've covered so many topics. We even had the Christmas carol service as well at Christmas. But if you've got ideas for things, please let me know. Drop me an email, robert@masonicpodcast.com, or through Twitter. It's on Twitter, it's Masonic Podcast. So if you could get onto there, let me know any thoughts or ideas to really make 2016 go, because of course we really need to get things out there, get people knowing about it and build up. This show genuinely does have a good following and it has got momentum, but it needs more of that in order to keep it going. So I'm not trying to have a go there. I'm hoping you haven't listened to this for the last 15 minutes and thought I've been having a rant. No, far be it. All I ask is that obviously you're not having to pay for listening to this. I'm having to pick up the costs for you guys to be able to listen, and I know so many of you do get a lot out of listening. So if you can help, the best way is to let other people know about it. That genuinely would be the best way to do it. Find out more by going on to masonicpodcast.com/20. That has those links to those flyers and all those other bits and pieces. So I genuinely appreciate that. I hope you have had a great 2015. Happy New Year for 2016. I'll be back then, and let's make 2016 a really good year. So many thanks. I'll see you soon. And of course, once again, Happy New Year.
Thank you for listening to In the Chair. Visit masonicpodcast.com to see the show notes and in-the-chair.co.uk for more resources to help you get the most out of your Masonic journey. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by rating and reviewing it on iTunes. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss our next podcast. If you're not already, follow us on Twitter @Masonic Podcast.